but it was basically that. And then in scrolling through to try to find the exact comment so I could quote it, I found 3 more. So I'll tell you what they actually said. One said that these are 3 different people. One said this, quote, like it or not, one of these mofos is going to be the ruler of the United States. There's nothing we can do to change that. Another one said, in all caps, I don't have the choice of no government, or I would choose no government. And then someone else said, I'm no fan of Trump, hate to vote for him. What choice did we have, really? So I want to respond to that, because it's one of those things that when you're inside the mindset of statism, that seems like a reasonable question. And it seems like, how can anybody dispute that? Like, one of them is going to win. The election's still going to happen. One of them is going to win, or even if Biden drops out and they put in some new clown, somebody's going to win. Somebody's going to be president. So to not vote, what good does that do? Now, as I've explained a million times, not voting isn't the solution. It isn't just don't vote and the world fixes itself. And I've often used the analogy of if somebody, comes up to you and says, oh, my head hurts. Wham! You say, what are you doing? I'm just hitting myself in the toe with this hammer to try to cure my headache. And if you say, don't do that, that's not going to cure your headache. Oh, you just want me to do nothing? What should I do instead? If you don't think I should hit myself in the toe with a hammer to cure my headache, hitting yourself in the toe isn't going to cure your headache. Not hitting yourself in the toe also won't cure the headache, but it'll make your toe not hurt, which will be progress. Instead of doing something counterproductive, you can first move up to the level of just not doing anything good or bad, because voting is doing something absolutely counterproductive and bad and destructive because it legitimizes the game. So you could start by moving up to the level of accomplishing nothing good or bad, but then there are other things you can do to actually accomplish something worthwhile, which voting never is. Voting isn't even up to the level of nothing. It's worse than nothing. It's a lot worse than nothing because it legitimizes it. But look at the mentality, and I totally sympathize. I totally understand. I probably said the exact same things myself 30 years ago, if anybody had suggested not voting. But look at the mentality. One of them's going to be the ruler. Imagine an analogy, and one reason I like to use analogies is if you do an analogy that's accurate, but you take it out of the setting that people are used to, everybody can recognize how bonkers it is. So I use the analogy of 2 people show up at your front door, and they say, you, Mr. Random Person, you get to decide which one of us is going to beat you up and take your stuff. So who's it going to be, him or me? And it's really on you. We'll be representing you, and you will have consented to this. You just pick one. And if you say, neither of you get to do that, well, no, this is our system. This is how it works. You can't have neither. One of us is going to beat you up and take your stuff. In that setting, would you go, well, okay, let me ask you some questions about like how much you're going to beat me up, how much of my stuff you're going to take? Or would you say, piss off or I'm going to shoot both of you? Like if it's 2 random people at the door. Now, if it's 2 crooks running for office, you know that doesn't work very well because they have lots of mindless enforcers with guns who will make you comply with their demands because they outnumber you and they outgun you. But still, in principle, why the hell would you express agreement with either of them robbing and subjugating and victimizing you? Which is what you're doing when you vote. But the fact that people have been so stuck in the political mindset, so stuck inside this narrow box of statism that they can't comprehend anything else is just sad. And I mean they can't comprehend anything else because they say, well, what other option is there? Either that guy rules us or that guy rules us. I can't fathom anything else in the world. It's going to be one of those 2. So let's pointlessly bicker over which one of those 2 it's going to be. And by the way, as I've pointed out a million times, it's going to be both of those 2. You're not going to vote for a guy and that's the rest of your life or the rest of time. They're going to take turns. Biden is here because Trump was here before. Obama, Bush, Clinton, Reagan, it doesn't matter. It goes back and forth. The left will rob you and dominate you. The right will rob and dominate you. They will take turns robbing and dominating you. And you keep stinking voting for it as if you're making a difference. How many hundreds of years have to go by of that happening before you realize this isn't really fixing anything? But some people will say, as they did, what other choice do we have? This is an amazing study of the power of propaganda and indoctrination. That people actually say that. Many years ago, I did a video called The Tiny Dot, and it shows the graphic representation of the difference between the total number of members of Congress and president and like all the federal political parasites, in addition to the total number of IRS employees, around 100,000, I think it's less than that now, compared to the massive number of Americans that get robbed by the paper pushers at the IRS in the name of this tiny little group of a few hundred political parasites. And people think, well, that's the system we have. That's legal. That's democracy. That's our great constitutional republic, blah, blah, blah. And the funny thing is, my little video called The Tiny Dot got a gazillion views just because if you just see a visual representation, the absurdity jumps out at you. It's like, why is this massive throng of actually productive people listening to that tiny dot of parasitical crux? And it's still a tiny dot, even if you add everybody who works for the IRS. Now, is it that each member of the giant throng is scared of the IRS? Kinda, sorta, also no. Because they're only each scared of what the IRS might do because they expect the rest of the throng to go along with it. So if they stick their necks out and say, I'm not playing the game, they expect the rest of the throng not only to go along with the thieves, but to condemn them for not going along with the thieves. And to a large extent, that's true. That is what will happen, because that is the anti-human nature of statism. It will make most of the victims of authoritarian BS cheer for the victimization of anybody who resists. And the political right does this very openly in its celebration of badge-wearing thugs beating the crap out of people for obeying laws against victimless crimes. Now, if somebody's actually like assaulting somebody or robbing somebody, I'm all in favor of them being stopped by whatever means necessary to stop them. And whether the person stopping them has a badge or not has no bearing on whether it's moral or not. The vast majority of what cops do is not that. They cage tons of people for having the wrong plan. Yeah, but it's the law. You broke the law. Okay, what the hell does that mean? Well, that tiny little group of political parasites over there, they did this weird ritual, and now it's the law that you're not allowed to have that plant, and so you deserve to be caged if you disobey. That is the mindset of a slave. The political right absolutely have the mindset of slaves just as much as the political left has the mindset of slaves. Because they resent anybody who doesn't bow to and kiss the ass of their political masters and pay tribute in the form of taxes and obey whatever arbitrary crap gets enacted as law. So most of the people stuck in that mindset, all they can comprehend when it comes to changing the nature of things, changing society, changing the country, whatever you want to say, all they can comprehend is how can we get the tiny little group of masters to change the commands that they're issuing? Because we can't fathom disobeying. No, then we'll be horrible criminals deserving of whatever the massa would do to us. However much he wants to whip us for not doing, we would deserve that. So all we can fathom is whining for the master to please change his rules and occasionally bickering over who the new master should be. Vote Jones! And that's all they can comprehend. So you have this huge throng of people, and a lot of them will say and think, well, what else can we possibly do? You have this tiny little group of parasites, and they tell us that the system is that they play their games, they do their bullshit propaganda, they play their election games. They're not even opposed to each other. They're two puppets of the same one ruling class. But even if you imagine they're different, the system is still this tiny group of lying, crooked parasites tells the huge throng, you have to obey us and you have to pay tribute to us and you have to bow and kiss the ring and do whatever we declare to be law and not do whatever we declare to be crime, completely independent of whether it's moral or not. Just because this is the system we have, and we are your rightful lords and masters. We are representatives of the U.S. government and our constitutional republic, blah, 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 blah. And the throng believes it. And so when that tiny group of parasites says, you have to give us a ton of money every year, the throng doesn't say, no, we don't. It says, we really wish you would tell us that we're allowed to not quite give you as much money as we did last year. A shining example of this is the people all excited by the fact that Trump is talking about abolishing the income tax. Did you hear? Have you heard? Trump's talking about doing away with the income tax. Number one, Trump is a lying sack of shit. The president can't do away with the income tax. That's not how the federal law system works. Congress decides that. The president can't do squat. If he had that power, there is not the slightest chance in hell of Trump actually doing that. He can't do that, and he would have no intention of doing that even if he could. But he will absolutely go out there and lie through his teeth, hoping that you're going to be dumb enough that you'll get excited at the prospect of having a master who tells you that you're allowed to keep more of your money. Oh, we love the master who lets us keep more of what we produce. Ew, because what other choice do we have? Here's an idea. If 50% of the country is like, oh, that would be great if Trump repealed the income tax, okay, why are you waiting? If 50% of the country just said, yeah, we're not going to file, we're not going to pay, we're not going to report anyway, there's no more 1099s, W-4s, we're not going to withhold anymore, we're going to run our own business, and you little gang of parasites over there, screw you, we outnumber you 1,000,000 to 1, get stuffed. If 50% of the population actually believed in freedom, 50% of the population could repeal the income tax overnight without the cooperation of a single politician by disobeying. But the vast majority of people who say, we want a huge tax cut or we want to abolish the income tax, what they mean is we want our masters to give us their legislative permission to keep what we earn. You're already a slave. If you think it's the master's choice whether you get to keep what you earn, or the master's choice how much to let you keep, you're already 100% a slave in your own mind. When all you can comprehend is begging the master to let you keep some more of what you produced. Incidentally, I've read before Frederick Douglass, who grew up as a slave, ridiculously brilliant dude, very eloquent, very perceptive, especially given the conditions of indoctrination that he was raised to think he was someone else's property. His comments about the not only the mental enslavement, but the concept of an income tax, and figuring out that that was literally worse, because at one point his master said, well, I'll let you go off and earn some money of your own. Now I get to decide how much of it I take from you and how much I'll let you keep. But you should be thankful that I allow you to do that. And Frederick Douglass did that for a while and then realized that this is somehow worse because when a master does this, the slave gets thankful for being allowed to keep what he produced instead of getting resentful and saying, why the hell is it your say how much of what I got paid for work I did, you didn't, you weren't there, master, you parasitical piece of crap. Why the hell is it up to you? Why am I asking you what I'm allowed to keep? So Frederick Douglass had this revelation that so far the American people haven't yet had that revelation to figure out why the flying boop do you think the crooks in Congress have the right to tell you how much of what you earn you're allowed to keep? So when people ask me, well, what other choice do we have? Disobey. Now, if there's only one of you disobeying because the rest are indoctrinated and enslaved, you'll probably get a tank in your living room and it won't go well for you. But if the whatever percentage that's going to zealously vote for, we're going to vote for Trump because he says you can do away with the income tax. If instead of 50% of the population or so doing that, if 10% of the population just said, we're going to repeal it ourselves by just not filing and not paying and not reporting and not withholding and not playing the BS game of those parasitical crooks who call their robbery taxation and law. That's the end of the income tax. And it can still be on, but they didn't repeal it. It wouldn't matter. And by the way, this has happened before. Alcohol prohibition was repealed by people just saying, screw you, we're going to do it anyway. And when you send your revenuers after us, we're going to either tar and feather them or just shoot them. And it became unenforceable. And then after the fact, government repealed alcohol prohibition to save face. Had nothing at all to do with like them deciding. It just, they lost control because people didn't obey. And that's something that still a bunch of supposedly pro-freedom people can't comprehend. If a tenth of the people who want to vote for Trump because he's for freedom just disobeyed instead of voting for anybody, every single policy, every tax could just be destroyed overnight by people saying, we're not doing that. And it's happened in history. I mean, the American Revolution was saying, yeah, we're not paying this anymore, we're not obeying, and that was only over tiny little trivial taxes compared to what we have now. But the idea, or the fact that most statists, all they can comprehend is, how can we get the permission of the masters to keep more of what we earn? If that's where your mind's at, you're still utterly duped. You're still utterly enslaved. Whether your focus is begging for a change of legislation or bickering over which crook is going to be on the throne, you're already doomed. If you really can't fathom a choice other than, well, one of them's going to be the ruler, if nobody obeys, there isn't a ruler. There's just some psycho telling you he has the right to rule you, and he has no power because he has no subjects willing to bow, and he has no enforcers willing to do his bidding. But that solution happens here in the brains of hundreds of millions of people instead of in any stupid ballot box or stupid act of legislation or any of the statist crap designed to keep you mentally enslaved. And it's amazing to watch the number of people who think they're fighting for freedom, but they start with the assumption that the path to freedom is going to be having people in power giving us permission to be free. You need to back up and rethink things if you're still in that mindset. And most people are in that mindset, right and left, Democrat and Republican. By the way, if you want to understand the mindset that actually gets humanity out of that, get a copy of The Most Dangerous Superstition and stop telling me that your only two choices are to kiss Biden's ass or to kiss Trump's ass. If that's all you can imagine, you need to expand your imagination.
This is quite a long one, this, and it requires a decent explanation. So I'll read it first, and then I'll go through each sentence, and I'll expand on it. Saying number 13. Jesus said to his disciples, compare me to someone and tell me whom I am like. Simon Peter said to him, you are like a righteous angel. Matthew said to him, you are like a wise philosopher. Thomas said to him, Master, my mouth is wholly incapable of saying whom you are like. Jesus said, I am not your master. Because you have drunk, you have become intoxicated from the bubbling spring which I have measured out. And he took him and withdrew and told him 3 things. When Thomas returned to his companions, they asked him, what did Jesus say to you? Thomas said to them, if I tell you one of the things which he told me, you will pick up stones and throw them at me. A fire will come out of the stones and burn you up. Oh, okay. Jesus said to his disciples, well, who are his disciples? Well, if you respond, you're cleaning your house, not eating dead flesh, and you're not eating garbage, no alcohol, and you're meditating. When the student is ready, that's you, your own higher consciousness will appear. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And you'll have this experience of a shift in your psyche. Psyche is soul. Because you are two. There's the ego intellect, which is just a story that you tell yourself to give yourself identity. But that's the false image. That's the graven image that we've been tricked into worshipping. You are like a righteous angel. Right. The name Jesus was practically invented by the Nicene Council. They needed a new name, and they came up with the name Jesus. But back then it was Jesus, because the letter J didn't come about until the 17th century, which makes a mockery of the Jehovah's Witnesses. It makes a mockery of the name Jesus. Back then the name was Jesus, and it was a combination of two gods, a druid god, He, and the old famous god, Zeus, Jesus, which later became Jesus. But in ancient Hebrew, the name was Yah-Osha. And Yah-Osha means the implement of Yah. Now, Yah is short for Yahweh, Yod-He-Wah-He, Y-H-W-H. There's no consonant, no vowels in ancient Hebrew. But you can work it out by looking at other ancient Hebrew words like Torah and Goyim. Now, the implement of Yah is the sacred secretion from the brain, Yah-Osha. And it increases consciousness, and you connect with the divine, the Father, the unified field, call it what you want. Now, nature is connected, but humans are experiencing the illusion of separation, and that's what you need to overcome. And it's about returning your home, your church, your temple, your body, that thing you live in, temporarily, back to its natural state as it was designed to be. You are like a righteous angel. The word angel comes from the Greek word angelos, which means messenger. So you are like a righteous messenger. So when you tap into higher consciousness, because during meditation, because you've turned off the ego, and then you have become open-minded. And when a mind is open, it will receive messages, angels, messengers. They don't have wings or any of that nonsense. That's just symbolism. Matthew said to him, "You are like a wise philosopher." There was nobody in the Middle East 2,000 years ago called Jesus, Matthew, or Thomas. Okay? Matthew's name was Matanya, which means Yah's gift. You are like a wise philosopher. Philosophy, philo, means love, it's Greek. And Sophia, or Sophie, is the Greek goddess of wisdom. She's feminine, your subconscious mind. So a philosopher is a lover of wisdom. But this is internal wisdom. This isn't about reading a book and becoming wise. This is a wisdom that is given to you by internal messages received from a messenger. Understand? Thomas, what was Thomas's name? I forget what Thomas's name. Please excuse me. Master, my mouth is wholly incapable of saying whom you are like. And I can kind of relate to that because you're trying to define the indefinable. You're trying to describe something that is beyond the ability of the mind to express. That's why allegory and metaphors have been used. Symbolism, to represent something that is outside of the human frame of reference. Jesus said, "I am not your master." That's very interesting, because all the religious people run around saying, "The Lord Jesus." And I've made a video about the Lord. If you have a Lord, you're not free. If you have a master, you are not free. It's simple.
But he goes on to say, because you have drunk, you have become intoxicated from the bubbling spring which I have measured out. Now, this higher consciousness is what controls the systems in the body. When your house is clean, the systems in the body balance out. Homeostasis, equilibrium, equity, no longer a worker of inequity. And then things start to happen.